What's up, everyone? My name is Benas, and welcome to the first Coffee Savant episode of this platform. Today is the last episode for this summer because I'm going on national team break and everything is focused on a national team so we can qualify for the Tokyo Olympics. But before we go there, I wanted to take this coffee break and I talked to the number one coffee savant in Europe, Ales Pospisil. I'm sorry, Ales. We talked a lot about the coffee culture in Europe. His coffee platform, European Coffee Trip, is the number one coffee platform in Europe. And I suggest for everyone to visit who's traveling and looks for a specialty coffee place or third wave coffee in Europe. Please enjoy this experience. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and let's grow this YouTube channel together. Subscribe to the podcast, the audio platforms. Everywhere you'll find the Benas podcast, wherever you search for it. And I hope you enjoy this episode. There's a lot of good stuff in here, not only about Europe, but also about Australia, about Japan, about the coffee culture in general, no-nos about coffee, and much, much more. So please enjoy and see you after the summer. Bye. Now we're being recorded. I was just told by Zoom, and here we are with Ales Pospisil. Thanks for doing this, Ales. It's a great pleasure for me, and I'll explain why it's a big pleasure for me because people expect me to be a basketball junkie and a sports junkie, but coffee is another passion of mine. And my number one goal was to get you on the show, and I'll explain why it was. So thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. I'm not doing that many podcasts, but when I saw your message and kind of the topics of the podcast, I thought it will be really fun because I have some background in sport, not really basketball, so I thought it would be a fun conversation.
Yeah, we can talk about a little bit about that as well. I mean, it's always, with coffee, the conversation can go anywhere. it's not guaranteed to take, go from A to B. You'll go from A, B, C, D, and then sometimes you end up at Z or somewhere else. But do you listen to Joe Rogan at all?
Not regularly because his podcasts are quite long, right? So I don't have enough time to listen to many of them. But I really enjoy the conversations there.
Yeah, I usually listen to them or Tim Ferriss, like in 2, 3, 4 goes. It's hard to listen for 3 hours to them talk. But he specifically Joe Rogan has another category or rubric or how you want to call it with Fight Companion where they just talk about fights. So mine gonna be the coffee savants, coffee savants, and you're the number one coffee savant for me. But before we dive into coffee, who's Ales Pospisil? What's your background? How do we get to this point here?
Yeah. So who is Ales Pospisil? So, I mean, I live in, I think let's start with where I am. So I'm in Czech Republic. Brno is the city I live in. And I actually studied technical engineering. I graduated telecommunications and electrical engineering, but I kind of always thought I understand slightly the technical side, but I'm also good with people. So I thought like, I will try to connect these two. So I worked for different kind of startups. And it was like, the number of the employee number, I was like always like decreasing. So it was like employee number 50, employee number 7. So I thought, okay, eventually I will start my own company. And even though the European Coffee Trip, or how you actually know us, was really kind of almost a random project at the beginning, it turned out to be a business that we and hopefully sustainable business at the moment. So the shift to coffee was more like trying to find something I like enough that I can dedicate to like several years of my life and eventually find and turn it into the business and find really interesting people to work with. So
yeah, it's a passion. It's really apparent that it's a passion, and usually, the passion will find you. Like you work around it, you work your daily lives, but then you discover certain things that draw you more closer to it. And that's for me, it's the same way. It was the same way with coffee. In terms of discovery, I started off with the classic latte, like you start off with just espresso shot and just a whole bunch of milk, and you don't really understand what coffee is. But as I was playing starting my professional career, my best friend and teammate, we always went to activate we call it activate, because your bladder gets activated and you always want to go to the toilet afterwards. So let's go activate, we call it. And so it started off with a latte, then you go into a cappuccino, and then slowly you reduce the milk. And then at some point you start discovering the true taste of coffee. And before that, we also put a whole bunch of sugar in there. So it was a disaster of a coffee mix for me. If I look back on it now, I was probably the unhealthiest healthy person at that time. But how did your coffee journey, like where did you start discovering and tasting the first bits of coffee and then falling in love with it?
I think it was in many ways similar, but I even started with the instant coffee with milk, that my girlfriend at the time, I think, made, and I was like, okay, so it's something warm that I can drink. Then, in Czech Republic, I don't know if it's in Lithuania, the same, we have our own kind of way of brewing Turkish coffee. Basically just have a cup, just put the ground coffee and boil water on top and wait for a few minutes and then drink it. So this is something, my parents would do. And at some point, I joined them. But the really kind of the specialty drinking coffee, I discovered in 2013, I guess, through the coffee festival here in Brno. And so there was one seminar, where one of the kind of now known specialty coffee roaster held, and there he brought all the different crazy looking machines, to brew a cup of coffee. And at some point, he was talking. At some point, he opened a bag of coffee. Perhaps it was from Panama. And he said, yeah, so this will smell and taste like strawberry and yogurt. And I was laughing in my mind. Yeah, of course, it will taste like that. But truly it did. So say, oh, coffee can really be something interesting. And that kind of brought us, to start getting some equipment and grind the but the tipping point came about a year later when I moved to Switzerland. I was kind of not very positively surprised that the coffee scene back there is actually least developed than in Czech Republic. So I was kind of hunting for, the specialty coffee roasters and some people. And at some point I said, okay, maybe, because I was using this meetup group for hikes and so on. So maybe there are some more people who likes coffee and would love to explore with me, because it's kind of pity to just call somebody and say, yeah, I'm interested to do something. But if I'm having a group behind me, yeah, so it can be, much more opening and accepting. So, basically I created something called Zurich Coffee Club. And that was nice. Another kind of I think, tipping point that led me later to, say, okay, maybe there is even more people who are interested in specialty coffee. So let's start traveling and mapping the specialty coffee, all around the place.
Genius. I'm absolutely no. It doesn't seem like it's like something revolutionary, because you're just starting to map it. But in terms of like, okay, now the travel has stopped for basically a year and a half, more or less. But let's talk a little bit about your platform, because I saw that you made some recent updates as well in terms of website, but. The discovery I had, because my job involves a lot of travel, and whenever I switched from predominantly working and living with a team together, where you travel with the team, I switched to being an MBA scout, and I travel on myself a lot, on my own a lot, and I traveled all across Europe, and that was more like 2014, 15. That's when it all started for me personally, and I started, like. You go into coffee places, you go a lot of coffee meetings, a lot of quick, in Spain or in specifically in Catalonia, you go for a cortado. In Italy, you go for a quick espresso. By the way, I get agitated when I hear espresso. I mean, it's such a big not insult, but I get a little bit. Do you have an opinion on that, by the way?
No, I'm easy, really. But there's, I guess because of the language, and I don't hear it that often. So yeah. I suppose like also different languages, different culture have a more inclination to do like the espresso and espresso exchange. So yeah. I'm not exposed to it so much. But I think it was at a certain, I think all this kind of issue with certain terminology is kind of part of the development of certain culture. And I think, at least it feels like in specialty coffee, we are kind of over it. Like, if we want to actually bring more people to the coffee scene and to the special coffee scene, we need to be more open and don't kind of bother that much with like, how people are kind of calling things, how they are ordering. I think it as a point, where you need to kind of make yourself a distinct, by taste, by name, by kind of culture. But I guess that's changed a little bit now.
I think that's probably me personally, and being like, whenever I have like my coach's hat on, I put my coach's hat, and then things have to be a certain way and not the other way, and then I get a little bit of a tunnel vision, but I started on my travels. I started to discover your platform. I started to look for coffee places and specialty coffee places. To start Googling it, and then your site start coming up. Always it came up. I guess 2016 was more frequently. I saw more places in Europe to be mapped out, and since then, everywhere I went, even like I was in Aarhus, Denmark, and right there, one cafe that was just right down my alley, and it hit the spot for me. So let's talk about what people can find on your European coffee trip platform, because it's a discovery for all the scouts, for all the people that travel for work. It should be number one platform for coffee.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very simple. I think, we do more things now, and we do more videos and other parts of the content, but what we wanted to build and what we are really building is kind of place where if you are in Europe and if you are searching for a good cup of coffee, so you go there, you find it. So we try to, first it was like us actually traveling and visiting all the places, kind of curating, but later when we saw the growth of the scene, we wouldn't be able to keep up with the pace of new cafes opening. So we kind of more invited the community, and now we are more like curating and making sure that we are adding the kind of the right coffee shops. And we have now over 2,000 of them in Europe.
Wow.
And kind of the main criteria is that they serve specialty coffee, which means that they are taking beans from the specialty coffee roastery, and these means that are usually focused on the quality of the beverage, but also I think like for the specialty, it has certain kind of characteristics and features that this coffee shop usually have. So I think it's so that's the number one goal, like to be a platform where people go if they are searching for the good cup of coffee in Europe, and we are trying to do our best to help them.
Yeah, but that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand yet. I'm not trying to generalize, but a lot of people say like, let's go have a cup of coffee, and they go have a cup of coffee, and it's just a cup of coffee, but you don't know really the essence or the taste of it until you really had a really good cup of coffee. I had the same thing with wine, a same experience with red wine. One time I was never a big wine or drinker or anything, but I had one really good Chile red wine, and it just opened my eyes. It was like, whoa, there is like a discovery here that you can really find out. And the same thing is about all delicacies like chocolate, coffee, cheese. So I think this niche is a very specific, also has a very specific and acquired taste that not everybody understands. But where should people start when they want to discover coffee? What coffee should they start with? And for all the rookies out there that don't understand the difference, what's the biggest discovery point for a newcomer?
Well, given that they probably already drink coffee, right? So I would say, rather than giving them or suggesting them to actually start making coffee at home, if they are, I think like the great entry would be find a kind of good coffee shop where they are. So like if they are Europe, I would suggest them to go to our website and try to find the closest coffee shop we feature. And there, I think it's kind of the role of the barista to give them their hand, and so be open. I think that's the prerequisite for anybody, like be open to slightly different taste, slightly new thing, because if you are drinking coffee a certain way and you don't want to change, so probably there is nothing we can help you. But if you want to explore different taste, different approach, so then just find the coffee shop. I think if you are kind of out of Europe, so search third wave coffee or specialty coffee kind of nearby, and they should give you some help. So that would be number one. And if you are already making coffee at home. So then again, like try to find not the coffee shop, but the specialty coffee roastery. Again, like try to search and find ideally some place that is nearby that you can actually visit and talk to the guys who are roasting coffee. Then just taste it next to each other, like taste the coffee you are usually drinking and taste it next to the coffee that you bought. And I mean, perhaps it's not for everybody, right? Like somebody likes to have the coffee the way he has it for ages, but it's at least good to taste the difference.
Yeah, that's when you say tasting. And now I had to think of the experience I had with a colleague of mine from another team who's also from the Czech Republic, and he was in Lithuania, and we went to a coffee taste. I like, it was a Sunday morning, and I had a coffee tasting invitation. So I took him with me. It was all in Lithuanian. He didn't understand anything, but we went through this coffee tasting experience. And you have to slurp it. You have to really, like, when you drink it, like, you have to really slurp the coffee so you can get it through your mouth, through your tongue, and all throughout your mouth. And it was a funny experience, because then you start experiencing the different regions of the coffee and the different tastes that they have. Is there a specific region you like, a specific area of the world where you would prefer the beans from?
I will still comment on the tasting, or the cupping as we call it,
Yeah.
because it's really interesting. Even I would say it's not like the something that I would suggest people to kind of do as a first step to kind of explore the specialty coffee, but it's definitely interesting ritual just to watch it and taste it. Like slurping itself can be a little bit intimidating, because then you focus not really on taste but how to slurp and how to not to spill it all over your t-shirt. But overall it's really nice way, because you can taste different. I mean, you realize very quickly that the coffee doesn't taste like coffee, but it has so many different flavors and characteristics. So it's really nice thing. And when it comes to my preferred coffee, I mean, it changes, but I mean, in general, African coffee is very, very, it's the origin of coffee, like, so Ethiopian or the region, Kenya. The origin trip, or actually for me, the only one that the coffee origin country that I visited was Tanzania. So that was amazing. But the African coffee, but it's, we should say it's usually more acidic, more fruity,
yes.
more. So it's again like perhaps not the entry level, but it's definitely, if it's a kind of naturally processed, so it's very aromatic and it's very very prominent. So you can taste the difference straight away.
Do you drink the Ethiopian coffee then as like in a Chemex filtered, or do you have prefer the espresso shot from the African region? Because then it's also a different experience as well.
Yeah, it can be too punchy, I suppose, through the espresso, because it's such a short drink, right? So it emphasizes all the flavors and taste. So then sometimes the espresso from Kenyan coffee or even some African can be perhaps too much for some people. But I mean, 90% I think I drink filter coffee. Now at the moment we have even espresso machine, some home espresso makers here, but I mean, it's quite a lot of hassle, to make a espresso proper way. So for that, I usually like to go to the coffee shops. I mean, COVID-19 changed it a little bit for many people, because many coffee shops were closed for too long. But I think it's, I mean, if you don't want to make really another hobby and really dedicate your life to kind of proper espresso making, it's much easier to brew a filter coffee.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, probably, well, we'll get to the AeroPress part also, but for me, I also am a Ethiopian Yirgachefe region fan, because it's enough for me also already just to smell the beans from Yirgachefe, because the smell of this region is so specific and so light that when I drink it through a Chemex, it almost tastes like tea. It's so it's so fine filtered and light on your, when you drink it, that it's a very different experience what people would expect from a regular filter coffee. So for me, it's also. Go ahead.
And yeah, I think for people who never tried kind of filter coffee. Perhaps that depends on the region, right? Because I guess in the US, like everybody kind of drinks filter coffee, or like North Europe, but then more you go to South, like there is like the stronger coffee and more espresso like coffee is kind of norm. When you say coffee, this is what you expect. So I think like when I also invite some people to taste filter coffee for the first time, so it's I think it's good to describe it as kind of tea, right? Because they can adjust the expectation and of the strength of the coffee, because it's not like this strong bitter liquid that they might be drinking otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I had also like an epiphany in terms of like what filter coffee can be like, And one time also with an Ethiopian espresso, I think it was Ethiopian or it was African for sure. Maybe it may have been Kenyan, but I was drinking the espresso and it was very acidic and it was very, very, well, you could feel the strength of it. Then it cooled down, because I was taking my time, and it cooled down, and the last bit of it was so sweet. It was like sweet tea at the end, and it was very thick, obviously, because it was an espresso, but it was so sweet, and it just completely changed the taste. Do you know how that comes about? Like, is that just a temperature change, or what? How does that happen?
Well, it can also happen if you didn't stir it, right? Like if you didn't stir the espresso, so then there are like there are the layers, right? Like because it's like the coffee extracts slightly differently as it goes through the the pack of coffee in the portafilter. So if you don't mix it, so there like because it's like thick liquid, right? So the layers remain there. So down there, like down in the bottom, there is more extracted, kind of properly extracted coffee, which is kind of can be already like a little bit too bitter, but if it's lightly roasted, so it can be like kind of like the sweet, but on the top, like you have already kind of a little bit over extracted coffee. So if you don't mix it, so then you might have a first sip that is actually more acidic, and then down is the proper kind of taste.
That's another epiphany I had just like 2 weeks ago, I think, and I never thought. And I felt like this barista told me when I was just about to drink. He's like, and I felt he said, you have to stir it just to mix up all the layers, even though I'm not putting any sugar or anything, and you still have to mix it. And for me, I felt like such a loser. I was like, oh no, I've been drinking, I've been taking, I'm a coffee savant, and I've been drinking espresso without mixing it. But it's definitely important to know for people who drink espresso without putting sugar. You still have to stir it. That's a very important point to make, for sure.
Or you don't, but you need to be aware that there is like this thing, right? So sometimes I also don't do it, but it's okay.
Yeah. Do you for your YouTube channel, because you started a YouTube channel just recently, right? It's a relatively new channel from from the time you started your platform to going over to the YouTube channel, because I've seen it just recently start popping up more, and the subscribers are through the roof, the views are through the roof, and I love everything I see on there. So can you speak a little bit what people can find on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, sure. Good to hear it's showing in your YouTube homepage. So
I'm subscribed. I'm subscribed now.
Yeah, so it's actually not new. So we, almost at the beginning, we wanted to do the videos. It was one of the motivation from my colleague to actually learn photography and learn video through the European coffee trip. So we actually, we started making videos early on, and the first videos we already published on YouTube were in 2014, and
wow.
And I think kind of bigger kind of videos were some of the interviews and the talks and lectures with our friend William Davies, who is a former barista champion, world barista champion. But I think it's, at the very beginning, we wanted to do the videos that are basically also the city guys. So as we visit the city and we find these coffee shops, we also film there, and we publish article and the video at the same time. So, but after a few months of trying to do that, we realized we are not at the point of kind of the level of production we can actually do it. Both on we wouldn't have enough time and we wouldn't have enough skills. So I think like for then, it was really a little bit slower. for us to make videos and publish regularly on YouTube. But I think like 2 or 3 years ago, we kind of made a bigger commitment to publish something regularly and develop our skills and kind of the topics that we want there. But we had really kind of like the bigger spikes were last year when people start to learn how to make coffee at home during the COVID, and people spend more time on YouTube and online in general. So it was one, and another kind of like now increased growth was like this year, actually also like the spring, where we released few of the popular videos, and through that like some more people start finding our channel.
Yeah, so that's probably why. I mean, I didn't take notice on the dates of the videos. That's probably why I missed the how the age of the of your channel, but it certainly started to grow more recently because of the pandemic. Probably, like you said, people are more at home. People are more interested in learning new things and cooking and brewing, and you can see that there is a huge interest in coffee. Also, just in general, learning more about the taste of it and more about the history of it. And I think your channel describes also very well the like the different milk drinks, the different, like from espresso macchiato all the way to latte. I saw that most popular video, and I think there's a lot of good discoveries there. What's your favorite video on there that you think people can learn the most from?
Well, it's it's a difficult question. I mean, it's difficult to judge, right? Like obviously, like the most popular. What can be interesting maybe for you, and there's some relation to the perhaps the sport as well. Like so the most popular videos are not the ones that we spend the most time, or that are perhaps the most crafted. It's just like kind of like when you fit the need and something that hasn't been done maybe before, and the and people find it useful, and what we realized like quite recently, that basically simple topics but explained well and through the right words and right visuals are actually something that's still missing on YouTube. So I guess we'll be dedicating more time towards that, because I mean in the past we did quite tutorials and reviews and how to make coffee, and obviously it's needed, but there is already a certain amount of these kind of videos on a channel. But if we take really really simple topic but explain it well, I guess it might help actually the most people. So this is what we realized.
Yeah, it has to be like whatever is foundational, right? I think foundational, just to have a really good idea, and that's where you can grow from there. Just have a good foundation to learn from. So I think your platform provides that as well. Do you have a favorite from all the travels you did? Do you have a favorite place or cafe that you went to around Europe?
Yeah, I'm always like thinking about like that, like what are our favorites, and obviously it's difficult to say, but we have but it's always related to the people, actually. I think like behind the places, and obviously there is like there are certain aspects like the quality and approach, but it's always connected to people. It feels when I think about kind of the really highlights, and one aspect is that very often in these coffee shops, the owners and kind of mastermind behind the business, they are still involved on a kind of daily basis, almost as working as a baristas. So in the recent years, and we try to actually also make videos kind of like this about these exceptional places on our YouTube channel. So one of it that we that we featured quite recently is a Fuku in Amsterdam, which is the coffee shop of the Fried Heads coffee roasters from Amsterdam, and the owner Lex is again like veteran on the specialty coffee scene. He was a vice barista champion, and because he's known as a roaster who also can roast the exceptional coffee, so very often the people from around the world send him samples to actually roast. So he takes these kind of like special treats and special lots and brew it in his coffee shop. So this is definitely one kind of highlight. Another kind of highlight would be the mame coffee shops in Zurich. Now they have two, and they also roast coffee. And the interesting thing, when I mentioned the Zurich Coffee Club at the very beginning of my coffee journey, so two of the owners are actually one of the early members of this club. So later
Nice.
they kind of actually start exploring coffee even more. They eventually become the barista champions of Zurich and of the world later, and then they start the business. So it's this is one of the most exciting thing for me, because the people we met early on, like in 7-6 years ago, are now kind of leaders in their fields, opening the kind of like, you know, very nice coffee shops and coffee roasters, or winning the championship. So that's an amazing feeling for us.
Yeah, you're like a pioneer influencer coffee for Zurich.
Yeah.
Go ahead, say it.
No. That's I can perhaps list some more, but it's very, you know, it's very personal. So I think it's once you fill certain criteria, and I think we try to do it with our city guys, then it's about the style and aesthetics and approach and people you meet in the coffee shop. But
that's one thing.
Suggest people go ahead and start exploring.
Yeah, that's the way to go about it. You know, when you said people, you know, I got excited, because that's the same. I had the same idea of or the same initial thought about people drawing you back to a place. Because, for example, when I travel around the world, the people and the environment that's warm, that you feel welcome at, that's when you want to go back. You know, like I loved Japan, I loved Australia, I loved New Zealand. You know, like going to these countries because the people are so welcoming to those like you kind of always want to come back to that. And the same thing is with cafes, as you say, the people, the baristas, if they're really friendly and you feel a warm environment, and then on top of that the coffee is good, you will always go back to that place. And I have my places like that. I'm always going back and forth between Lithuania and Berlin, because I also have a place in Berlin. And in Berlin I have my place. Actually, it's a delicacy place. It's not like a specialty coffee place, but it has lots of different regional, like chocolates, cheeses, coffee. But it's called Goldhand and Samson. I want to just give them a shout out on here. And they're not a specialty coffee place, but they sell specialty coffee equipment. For example, you know, they sell the Chemex. They sell all the different AeroPresses, and then they have you know, my favorite drink is the flat white, and the way they prepare it, the way the baristas and specific 2-3 baristas, then when they're there, I'm so excited to see them as well. And then that's the place you go to always, right? It draws you to there. And another place in Berlin that I also liked was Outgrow. It's also in the same in my it's fairly new. It's like two years old, young, and they are also growing. The barista that is there quite frequently is Australian. So he also really is, you know, he takes a lot of pride in the coffee making. And then the flat white, because it is from Australia, it's especially good. And I drink it usually with oat milk. So for me, I think that's the milk that doesn't distort the taste of the coffee too much. You still feel the taste of it. Do you have a specific drink that milk drink that you enjoy drinking whenever you drink with milk?
Yeah, I usually order cappuccino cortado. So I still like the regular milk, or cow milk is my favorite. I usually take a oat milk. For me, it's kind of like similar to cappuccino actually, but it's kind of like the very, you know, breakfasty like coffee. So that's because it's more thick and more. Yeah, there's some kind of like specific taste of it, right? Like when mixed with coffee, but.
And that's the biggest, like in Italy, the biggest no is ordering a cappuccino in the afternoon. you will get thrown out of the cafe, because they all in Italy, it's fairly known fact that cappuccinos in the mornings with a croissant, and in the afternoon you will not get that. So
I mean, have you tried? I think it's kind of overhyped, this thing, like that they would be they would not be really serving cappuccino or
No,
stuff.
no,
But
no.
I mean,
I'm being facetious. I'm being facetious, but it's obviously in my circles when I talk to scouts or to other coaches. When you order a cappuccino in Italy in the afternoon, they will laugh at you. But that's that's generalizing it, and that's obviously being sarcastic. But
yeah.
the general rule is you drink it in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, like just a short comment. Yeah, there are like, like the Italian or Greeks, and obviously also Australians, because the coffee culture is like such a strong, so they have like very strong opinions about what is right and what is wrong, right? So I mean, I'm much more open, but obviously when we published the video that you mentioned about different kind of coffee or espresso based drinks, so there was like obviously ton of Italians commenting that when I mentioned it's like the recipes are not set in stone, and they are kind of changed from country to country, region to region. Say no, this is the way we do it. similar to Greeks, because they are like known for like their iced coffees and the frappe and Freddo espresso and so on. So when we did a video about the kind of all iced espresso coffee drinks, there were many comments on from Greeks that this is not the way to do it, and we should not confuse people. So I mean, we accept that, but so this is kind of funny way, like, I mean, people take the pride of kind of being, the drink coming from their country, which is great. But obviously, different part of the world can usually adapt into their preferred tasting. And that is okay to me as well.
I completely agree. I think I'm embracing those differences. You have to embrace and you have to take it with the grain of salt, but also that's the beauty of the cultures. The different cultures in Europe, because Europe is such a congested area with so many different traditions, so many different cultures, so many different like tastes and ideas of it, that the differences should be embraced. It shouldn't divide it. It should actually bring us together, in whatever aspect it is, and be tolerant and be accepting of each other, whatever it is. Because taste, politics, whatever, you can always argue, you can always find the differences, but they have to be embraced, I think.
That's true.
Do you in basketball we talk a lot about upside of a player, and that has like a biggest space to grow still and get better, and we have underrated players. Do you have anything that a cafe that or let's talk about a country, a country in terms of upside and coffee knowledge that you see that still has to grow, and one underrated coffee country in Europe specifically?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good question. So I think I will start with the underrated. I think one of the underrated is definitely Ukraine, and eventually also Russia. But I think the Ukraine, because it's like the smaller, even smaller country, but like the level of the coffee scene itself it's amazing. I mean, we been there for the first time maybe 2015, 16, and obviously because they are not like that integrated into Europe, so there's not like the huge number of tourism and like not as many people going to the the eastern countries to western. So there's not that many tourists, but like level of coffee and also their kind of the coffee heritage coming from brewing coffee with the Chesve or Ibrig, and the level of the barista skill is amazing. So I think that's definitely like the underrated is Ukraine. When it comes to what is the upside, like some kind of like potential for growth, I think like there can be many. I think like when it comes to specialty coffee, I mean, because there are like certain regions, like like the former Yugoslavian countries, like Serbia, Croatia, where the coffee and like all the Balkan, where the coffee culture is really strong. Everybody loves coffee, but they love it the certain way, right? Like very strong and rather bitter and so on. But I think like when it comes to the potential for kind of entering the specialty coffee scene, perhaps from Europe, I would say like this region is can grow a lot.
Yeah, I think I haven't. That's in Ukraine. I haven't traveled much in the last years, and I would be excited to explore that a little bit more. I saw in Moscow that because when the World Cup, the soccer World Cup was in Russia, I think they put a lot of and invest a lot of money in infrastructure in restaurants and cafes, and I think since then it started blossoming a little bit more in terms of like quality of food, quality of restaurants and cafes at the same time. I assume I'm know from what people told me afterwards, because I have a lot of friends there.
Yeah.
But
So
I would
there's
be.
yes. So just short comment on what it can be interesting. So I think it's interesting how this coffee scene developed. Like if you compare kind of strong coffee cultures like Italy or Greece, where actually specialty coffee people have to make a change from let's say bad coffee to good coffee or better tasting coffee.
Yeah.
Interesting to Russia is that actually not that many people drank that much coffee before, right? So it's
Yeah.
more like the tea, and so for them, like the transition also is slightly different because they are switching from tea to coffee, and so the dynamic and maybe also the speed is slightly different and can be even faster, like the adaptation.
Yeah.
What is interesting is that I think the two former world coffee roasting champions are from Russia. So it's
Wow.
meaning like the kind of coffee roasting scene is quite strong, or they have difficulties when it comes to kind of getting the green coffee beans, right? Again, through the logistics of it. But
Yes.
the
Yeah.
skills, when it comes to skill of roasting, it seems they are really, really well developed. But we are not that as much exposed to it because, again, like logistics issues.
Yeah, it's that those it's easier also, it's kind of hard in Moscow if you go, Moscow is huge. It's huge. So
Yeah, it's huge.
when you go to a place, you have to really map it out ahead of time when you walk, in the old Arbat Street, and then if there's any coffee shops, you have to know ahead of time where to go, which region of Moscow to be precise with your exploring. Do you have a interest in, or have you discovered the coffee fats that are coming out or that were coming out, like keto coffee, the mushroom mixes from Four Sigmatic that I drank? I also drank and tried a lot, with lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, and any like the bulletproof coffee in the US was very huge, with the keto diet and the MCT oils. I tried all of it, and like I don't know. I don't know if it's some effect that I'm just imagining, or if it's truly healthy, or is it not really not really good for the coffee culture to have that in the mix?
So I will start with I try to I mean, I have a bulletproof coffee from time to time. So I was kind of like drinking for some time. We even have a video about it, but like 4 years ago maybe. And but the one video I might be interesting for you and for the listeners, that actually about the kind of health aspects of drinking coffee that we did in December last year, and it was like it was a really interesting talk with and video we did with Danny from Switzerland, who is actually former triathlete, like professional triathlete, but also he got very involved in the coffee industry, and he was kind of the finalist of the World Brewers Cup Championship. So he has a kind of both from these two worlds, and he now works open a business as a nutritionist. Like for kind of like high performance, either from the sport or from kind of like the business. So we had all these kind of like different topics related to the drinking coffee and how much and when and what's good and what's bad. So I think it would be a good video to watch and listen. So I also asked him about kind of bulletproof coffee. So for him, it's more like mixing the two kind of like elements that are potential benefits, right? Like healthy fats and caffeine in coffee, and kind of all the nutrition that comes from coffee. So then it's kind of like he doesn't see like there's that much like this combination emphasized so much. It's just like combination of these two that is actually nicely palatable, because if you froth it, right, or mix it so it's nice kind of texture that is easy to drink. So for me, it's kind of like the cappuccino, if I'm not in the coffee shop, when I feel like I need more energy. So that's how it works for me. I haven't tried much of these mushroom coffees and so on. I asked him about it. He said it's not proven. So when it comes to kind of like scientific studies, it's not proven yet what exactly, it does. But I assume, I mean, it's before people, like, if they try it on their own body. So that's the most important, right? If something works for you, it's good. I guess all these are not like these drinks. They don't have a taste of coffee in the first place, right? So it's kind of combination of the benefits of combining these coffee and something, which is interesting for.
I think everybody needs to listen to their own taste buds and see what their body feels, how the body reacts. Because I also reacted strangely to some keto coffees that were specific mixes. I did try, and when I'm in the US, there's also, it's easier to buy it and to order it online. Laird Superfood, you know, Laird Hamilton, the surfer. So him and his wife have a company, Laird Superfood, and they have a whole bunch of creamers that you can use, curcumin, just different tastes that you can put in your coffee, and just to check it out and see how how your body reacts with MCT oils in it, and the powder is really tasty. So depending on what you like, you can use that and spice up your coffee a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there's an advantage, I think, in the US, right? Like, such a huge market and so many different supplements. I think it's more very often when I listen to some podcasts, and it's like, okay, it would be nice to try, but when, I mean, like, it's not that easy to get in Europe. But I think, like, we are usually, it comes in a few years, because Europe is kind of like catching the wave, and also in these things. But like, we are usually a little bit slower, like, for different reasons.
I'm generally open-minded with everything, and then you really sometimes you catch side eyes. People are look at me strangely, because I'm aware that there's a lot more to anything. Like I get involved, or I get a little bit caught up in the nuances and the details, because I just have I'm open to too much information, and I'm trying to distinguish it, and I try to get a taste of everything, because there's so much to discover. It's not only about coffee, about everything, So being open-minded, I think, is the key, and then trying out what you like and what you don't like, and then you can distinguish better of how you want to go about your daily life. If I wanted to talk to you about regions outside of Europe, because yours is generally, specifically on Europe, but I'm sure you traveled outside of Europe as well. So have you discovered any regions that you found are very coffee oriented and embraced coffee as much as some of the countries we talked about? For me specifically, it was always Australia. I've been to Australia twice now, and the second time I've been to, I was already more aware of coffee, and I went to Flinders Lane. It's right downtown. And there's just a whole bunch of cafes, flat whites, and bulletproof coffees, in Australia they don't embrace the bulletproof and the coffee fats as much. They are trying to stay within the traditional coffee drinks, whether it's flat white or Chemex or things like that. But I was very fortunate. I had a tour. I think I signed up for a coffee hopping tour around cafes in Melbourne, and everybody else canceled, so it was just me. And I had a private tour through 6 cafes, I think. So it was amazing. So I was wondering if you had an experience similar to that, or if there's a region outside of Europe that you feel like is a really, really good coffee country.
First, I will say perhaps you have much more experience, like, as you travel much more outside of Europe than we do. And the second, that when you come to Czech Republic, so happy to be also the guide either in Prague or Brno. So happy to show you some places. So you have
awesome.
I will overview of the local coffee scene. I mean, the Australia, I mean, we had only one time to visit Australia, and it's definitely like we've spent some time in Melbourne. It's definitely the mecca of the coffee, and I think from Melbourne and from the whole region, actually many of the specialty coffee actually spread to UK, to London first, and then from London actually to the rest of the Europe. So I think it's kind of influence came from the Australia. That was influenced actually back then from Italy, right? Like Italian immigrants who brought actually interesting coffee and hospitality. So that's I mean, everybody kind of knows, right? But I think when it comes to kind of like other interesting places that we've been to, so we had the chance to spend some time in South Korea, in Seoul, and that's the great example of like really well developed the coffee culture and interesting concept and rather big, right? I mean, you realize you see when you travel around Europe. So usually, kind of specialty coffee is more like kind of like small businesses and people who actually got excited about coffee and then open their own small shop. Eventually, if they are successful, they can grow and open a roastery and so on. It seems like for some reason, like in Asia, that the specialty coffee already comes with more money for some reason. I don't know all the economics and politics of it, but so it's kind of like sometimes even too fancy places, but with really, really high quality coffee. Also, what is interesting perhaps is that kind of the most expensive coffees in the world, like that when there are, you either buy kind of commercial coffee on, the markets, or you have buy specialty coffees, let's say through the dealers or importers, or there are even for the kind of high price coffee, there are the auctions, and most of the auction coffee goes to Asia actually. So they have really strong kind of like the purchase power and kind of like the willingness to pay extra and premium for higher quality coffees, and it usually goes to actually South Korea, Japan, or Taiwan. So I would say I haven't been in Japan and Taiwan, but I suppose these are also the countries where it's developing really fast, and the coffee cultures are interesting. Similar to China, again, like there is big talk about the China as a both coffee producer, because they have certain region where they actually produce coffee also, and as a coffee drinking culture, because they are primarily drinking tea, right? But it's kind of like if they switch, or if more like a big amount of people actually switch to coffee, so it's a huge market. So that's the one area I think, like exploring Asian countries.
It's
and
interesting.
Also like the very touristic, like the locations, like Thailand and Vietnam, where like the bigger cities, they always have already like developed like kind of third wave specialty coffee culture.
Interesting. I apart from Australia, Japan was to me very, very eye-opening in terms of culture, but also cafes, because I googled specialty coffee in Tokyo, specialty coffee in Kyoto, but in Tokyo, and they take pride in those cafes, and like you said, like they have a big variety of different specialty coffees and the beans, but I also, when I visited Hong Kong had a lot of good cafes that were like in those small streets, and it's also very modern, very clean, very nicely set up, that you can really enjoy a good cup of coffee. That was to me, that was a really good discovery. Apart from that, I was in Bali, and in Bali, the coffee, the consistency, the coffee itself was gooey. It was a different taste. It was a very acquired taste, but the water, it was not thick, not one. It was like almost like you're drinking slime. Like you're drinking a different type of coffee consistency. I don't know how to properly explain it, but it was tasty. It's just an acquired taste. You have to really, again, be open-minded and not be closed off to the coffee you always drank, but try new things. And that was one thing that I enjoyed, a new discovery. But one thing I didn't enjoy, and I saw you have a video on that as well, is Nitro coffee. That was one coffee drink that I could not find the taste for it, just because it's a little bit, it's bubbly, it's a little bit different. And I don't know what's your experience with Nitro coffee.
Nitro coffee, I mean it's I wouldn't order it very often in the coffee shop. I go to like, so I hear your comment, or I understand the comment. On the other hand, it's quite interesting concept. I mean, it's when I first tried and tasted, was actually in Berlin, in our friend's place called Happy Baristas, and and they made quite interesting comment that I think it's still valid, that actually for them it feels like it's kind of, for actually way how people can drink even more black coffee and not to mix it with anything, right? Because the idea of drinking black coffee is that you actually can taste coffee and you don't mix it with another ingredient, then actually covers the coffee. But the problem very often people have is like you actually don't order cappuccino necessarily because of the milk, but because of the texture, right? Like feel of the drinking. So what the Nitro does with the kind of the infusing the bubbles and kind of cascading effects, that actually it makes a black coffee more creamy, kind of. So I find this quite interesting and kind of for actually spreading the idea of like black coffee even more. And for that, I find it interesting, and perhaps even for me, maybe even more refreshing than just like plain cold brew, right? Because it's basically cold brew coffee that is infused with nitrogen, right?
Yep.
So maybe now I don't drink very often neither a cold brew, but maybe now this day I would even opt for Nitro instead of the plain cold brew.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't encountered enough Nitro cafes to be open to exploring it more. So maybe that's the problem with you. If you're not exposed to it a lot of times, then you're probably not also going to try it a lot, right?
Yeah, but it's definitely, I think, because we talk about kind of entry level coffees, right? Something that it's good to try. Maybe you can kind of get hooked. So I think for this, it can be even more like for people who are used to drink like the milk coffees and bigger doses. So maybe that can be kind of like transition, right? So you don't just go and try filter coffee or just cold brew, but this can be interesting transition, then eventually can lead to appreciating more and the shorter and more intense kind of like the black coffees alternatives.
Yeah, I agree.
But definitely huge trend, definitely huge trend, and I think it will be developing further and further.
Ales, I don't want to steal your time. I know we've been talking here for a while, but I still have a couple more questions, and I have 5 espressos prepared for you. So 5 quick questions that I'm gonna throw at you and with quick answers. But before we go into the espresso shots, I wanted to ask you if you had a chance to see recently. I saw, just maybe you've seen it before, this automated baristas that are doing the latte art. As the robots are doing the latte art and preparing the coffee for you. Have you seen that recently pop up? And do you think that's going to take away the jobs of the baristas?
I've seen it a long time ago, actually. So it's been on a trade show for several years. So it's not like really new. It's usually kind of interesting part of the trade shows. And I saw it actually in Melbourne when you asked about the culture. So there was one kind of really like open, right? It was not like just a model. It was like really kind of functioning robot cafe. And we also have a kind of short video about it, like the actually difference between like ordering the coffee before and after COVID, and kind of like human person and then robot. I don't think it's if the robots or like the automated machine will be making better coffee than humans, so let's give it to them and like let people do the human part, meaning like talking with people and providing the service. I think we shouldn't be worried that much, or baristas shouldn't be worried. I think it's eventually development in all the other fields, like that humans should do the human things and let the machine do all the other stuff. I guess it would be possible to do that already. It's not like too complicated technology, I suppose. It's just like it would cost too much money to make them, enough. So it's worth it. So, but what I assume is more that kind of more like automated machines, something that just push the button and it's just calibrated by person, like every morning and so on, will come earlier, because it seems, I haven't really did that much research, but also at the trade shows, they are now like basically testing kind of the top level of the super automatic machines, and even like top baristas are claiming that they are quite close to actual level of the coffee you can get from the person. So I think that's so not really having the kind of moving head doing all the kind of the latte art and stuff, but rather have it kind of in a sort of a black box, but just operated with the person, or like even like just from the customer. So I think that's maybe more probably the future, and maybe not that far from now. And then the barista itself will do a slightly different job, right?
Yeah, I think that's, again, I'd probably attribute that to COVID, to speeding up all this process of automation, because also some people will be scared to encounter other people. I'm a people's person. I like to hug people. I like to, so I will always be there and prefer the person instead of the robot. But who knows? People, like we said, like the COVID, I think sped up the automation process, and it's going to change the world. Let's go into
but that's important, right? Like, but you don't need actually that person you hug and talk to. You don't need them to actually eventually made your coffee, right?
No.
I think that's the kind of the middle step, probably. Yeah. To get just from the vending machine, I guess. Yeah, I wouldn't really enjoy that neither. Like,
No, it's everybody choose their own fate, right? So like, it's up to everyone else. But of course, you're not gonna go in and hug your barista unless you know them very closely. So I have 5 espresso shots for you, and some of the things we talked about. But if you had one answer to nail down to all of these questions to decide, preferably one answer and not much time to think. So the first thing that pops to your mind, we'll roll with that.
Okay.
Biggest no-no in the coffee world. So like biggest pet peeve or biggest no-no that you think that shouldn't be done.
Well, now I'm taking too much time to think about it. Okay. No. Ooh. Okay, so what comes to my mind is the barista. For baristas, no is touching the rim or touching the cup from inside. So it's kind of like not hygienic and like the kind of no for the cafe for baristas.
Yeah, that's good. Number 1 cafe. If you had one flight today, where would you go?
I would go to Zurich, to Switzerland, to Mame coffee shop.
One favorite coffee region that you would prefer over every other region that you, if you had a choice?
Yeah, Ethiopia.
Yeah, we talked about it. So
origin. Yeah, it's like lovely.
Yeah. If you drink a flat white, what milk would you drink it with? You said whole milk, but if you had advice to make, and if somebody doesn't drink whole milk, soya, oat, almond, what is the best alternative for a flat white?
I don't really know. I didn't do the test, but oat milk sounds like a good option to me.
Yeah, I mean, I prepared these questions beforehand. When we talked about it, you said whole milk is your choice, so I did not change it along the way. But I feel like a lot of people are exploring different tastes and different milks, and I was always told that oat milk is the one that doesn't distort the taste because it doesn't have the sweetness of almond or any other milk. So for me, it was oat always. I didn't know if you had any other.
That's true. I mean, like it has a development, right? Like, so I guess the whole alternative milk for milk coffees develop quite a lot over the time, and it's much easier to foam it. It's much more easy to mix it actually with coffee now, and there are much more alternatives. So I mean, originally it was soy, I think. Then kind of oat milk got over, and then there are the cocoa or almond. But recently, kind of like maybe interesting for folks is like the pea milk, like from peas.
Yeah,
I haven't tasted yet, but I saw it, from in Scandinavia. Some brands are making it, so maybe it's something that we'll see more often in the future.
Yeah, like pea protein has been big in the vegan culture, so I guess that's also where it comes from. And by the way, in Australia, oats, I don't think they have their own oat milk brand. So there's a big upside, I think, also in Australia in terms of oat milk brands and producing their own oat milk, manufacturing it. That's not the last time I heard about it. Maybe this changed since then. But the last question for you, last espresso is, when's the last time you've been to a Starbucks?
I don't go, right? But I mean, I've been to. I mean, in general, I don't go, even though I don't have like this huge hate about them. But it was not part of my coffee journey. But I was at the Starbucks Reserve in Milan, which is
Okay.
amazing experience. They have this kind of like huge place, and it's just like it's like a wonderland for the coffee enthusiasts. Even though the coffee itself, I was not like the huge fan, but the overall experience and customer service was incredible. So
interesting.
The Starbucks Reserve kind of like venues, I think they have multiple right around the world, but I had the chance to visit the one in Milan, and it was like
interesting. I try to avoid, just because the taste is not my. I just don't find the beans it fits my taste. But because of the airports recently, not all cafes are open, so you're limited options. And I was in the Starbucks just recently when I was flying. I was in Brussels, I believe it was. So that's my experience with the coffee. And you've been my first coffee savant. I really appreciate you, Ales, on coming on the show and talking to me about the coffee experiences, the different coffee trips around Europe. And I would love to have you on again and talk more. I think we've talked a lot about different parts of Europe and generally the coffee culture around the world. And I'm happy that you contributed, and you're the first contributor on this category.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for really nice chats. It was nice to talk about coffee with not a coffee person, even though I'm not really the coffee person. I've never really worked professionally behind the bar, but so I'm also like on a similar path as you as a coffee learner, coffee enthusiast. But obviously, I can spend much more time than you doing that because I turn it into my regular job, right? But yeah, I'm looking forward to eventually meet in person someday.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward. I will be in the Czech Republic, definitely, and the first call will be to you. So I appreciate it again, and I'm looking forward to meeting in person as well.